Say what you will about Disney, and there's a lot to say, but its animated shows have really been on a roll lately. It's a cliche to say that shows, especially cartoons for some reason, were always better back when you were a kid, but that's just not true for me. Hell, Gravity Falls came out when I was in my 20s. And with Disney's new class of animated series like Amphibia, Molly McGee, and today's feature, Dana Terrace's The Owl House, this is one of the best runs Disney cartoons have probably ever had. The Owl House maintains such a great balance of comedy and drama as it weaves a deep story full of plenty of smaller adventures that build the world, paired with fun, interesting characters to help us laugh and connect to. You can't lose. The Owl House and Amphibia are clearest contemporaries being isekai series, one where someone is transported to another world. We already covered the Amphibia timeline earlier, and now it's the Owl House's turn, despite not being fully complete as of recording. But for now, this is the timeline of the Owl House. And special thanks to the Owl House wiki for helping us keep all the facts straight, so if I say something wrong, it's their fault. Not actually, it's a dense series, so don't get mad at any of us. Oh, and because we're going chronologically, there's going to be like a lot of spoilers right at the beginning, so do watch the series first if you can. It's really good. 1,000 plus years prior to the story, the Collector arises. They're considered neither witch nor demon, but a child from the stars, and at some point hunts the owl beast that would later be used to curse Ida. They're also imprisoned in the in-between by the Titan who likely meant to keep them away from his son, King. The Titan Trappers would later form and venerate the Collector as the Great Hunter. After this, the Titans begin to go extinct, and the Titan dies, forming what would become known as the Boiling Isles. Prior to the 1600s, the Savage Ages take place on the Boiling Isles. This time period is known to be a period of wild magic in which mixing of magic was common, and the Coven system had yet to exist. This era would end with the ascent of Emperor Belos, who would then create the Coven system to eradicate the use of wild magic. It's during this time that two brothers are lured into the Boiling Isles by a witch. During the Savage Ages, the Deadwardian era begins, in which witches used their powers to help each other. This era is considered dangerous by modern-era witches due to the usage of wild magic, however, the era was relatively peaceful. It's shown that during this era, the islands were vastly different, with the sky and sea being a slightly different color, and the trees being magenta as opposed to red, which some theorize happened due to the over-harvesting of palistrom trees. It's during this time that the human known as Philip Whittabane appears in the Boiling Isles, trapped. He begins to detail things in his journal that he saw and experienced, though it's known that many entries within his journal are considered false. Philip begins to harbor resentment towards witches due to the way they treat him because he's human. Philip would learn later of the Collector and begin to search for them. Two witches known as Crab Maiden and Aunt Gertrude decide to help Philip get the Collector's tablet, but he betrays them. The two witches manage to escape though. 1600s and beyond, Philip Whittabane manages to make contact with the Collector. He makes a pact with the Collector, vowing to free them if they teach him about magic and a draining spell with which he plans to eradicate all witches. This, however, is to be a false deal, as Whittabane never plans to actually free the Collector. Whittabane would then begin to create homunculus-like beings known as Grimwalkers, of which many years down the line, Hunter will be the latest. Whittabane then takes the alias Belos and pitches himself as a great witch that can speak with the Titan. He begins to grow popular and becomes known as the Emperor of the Boiling Isles. He begins to institute a coven system in which wild magic and wild witches are forbidden. This ends the Savage Era, which some believe means safety, while others believe it's the start of a tyrannical period by Belos. At some point after, the Emperor's Coven is formed, and joining this coven becomes the joint dream of both Ida and Lilith Clawthorn. Lilith is shown to not be as proficient as Ida, which causes her to handicap Ida by cursing her with the Owl Beast. Unbeknownst to Lilith, Ida planned to let her win anyway, sacrificing her dream for her sister. Modern Era. Luz Noceda has her book taken away by Owlbert, who's scouting for human treasures that Ida Clawthorn plans to sell to take care of herself. Luz meets her and begins to show her how these human treasures are used, which only makes her wares more popular, causing Ida to take interest in the human, which Luz mirrors when she learns that Ida is a witch. She begins to hound Ida into teaching her how to perform magic because Luz wants to LARP her favorite YA novel series. It's then that Ida convinces Luz to break into the Conformatorium where they'll find her friend King's crown. They do so and free the prisoners. Luz is later tricked by a supposed wizard who claims that she's the chosen one, but it turns out that this is a plot by Adagast the Puppeteer who hopes to use her to get to Ida. Ida appears, but with the help of Luz, they manage to defeat Adagast, and Ida proceeds to eat him because Ida's just cool. Luz slowly grows discouraged with how little Ida is teaching her, and hopes to enter Hexside Academy. She meets Willow, and to help her get a passing grade, Luz pretends to be her abomination. But things go south when the principal, having been impressed with the quality of the abomination, plans to dissect it to see how it was formed. Gus and Willow help Luz escape. However, instead of Willow being punished, she's instead allowed to change tracks to the plant magic track due to her overwhelming skill in her use of plant magic. Luz, however, is banned from ever returning to Hexside, though this is later rescinded. Glyph rediscovery. A boiling rainstorm begins to fall, and King decides to teach Luz about the various demons of the Boiling Isles. To help her learn to use magic better, King steals one of Ida's potions to give to Luz. However, they don't know that this keeps Ida's curse at bay, and Ida transforms into the Owl Beast. So naturally, they flee from Ida. While rewatching one of Ida's previous demonstrations of a light spell on a cracked phone, Luz discovers that the magic circle used possessed a symbol which couldn't be seen by the naked eye. She recreated the symbol on paper and learned that magic can be cast without a magic bile sac, allowing Luz to rediscover the ancient form of magic that existed before the modern era. With this, they pacify Ida's Owl Beast form and return her to her normal form. They would later attend a convention for witches to learn of the different covens one could join, with the most prestigious one, the Emperor's Coven, also being present. Here, Luz argues with Hexside student Amity, who believes Luz can never be a witch, and to prove that she can be as good as Amity, makes a bet with her that whoever wins a magic duel will be proven right, with Luz swearing off magic if she loses. However, as Ida sponsors Luz, Lilith sponsors Amity, and together they both cheat to help their respective proteges win, with Amity being unaware that she was being helped. This causes a mutual forfeiture, and Amity runs off while Lilith and Ida duel, where she would then be comforted by Luz. Later, they go to the library during the time of the Wailing Star. Breaking in at night with the Blight kids, Luz discovers that the magic of the star causes the books to come alive, and if the story is rewritten, the rewrite will also come to life. They manage to find Amity's secret hideaway, where Luz discovers that Amity loves the Good Witch Azura books just as much as Luz, and she attempts to stop Amity's brother and sister from exploiting Amity's diary to bully her, but she fails and is caught and called a bully by Amity. She tries to make good with her, but they're stopped by a children's book character who had been frightfully altered by Luz and the Blight kids. They barely survive, and only because they fixed the rewrite. Later, Luz, King, and Ida make a bet that they can't survive a day in the other's shoes. Spoiler alert, they're right. Nobody survives a day in the other's shoes, and so the bet they made becomes void. Luz's friend Gus later has his role as president of the Human Appreciation Society challenged by Bartholomew. He lies and tells Luz that she can return to school, but only because he wants her to prove that Matt's items are fake. In doing so, he ends up getting himself and Matt sent to detention, where they must escape essentially a Sarlacc with mind hacks abilities. This scandal leads to Luz being re-banned after Ida gets her unbanned, though Gus takes all the blame since it was technically his fault. He loses his position as the head of the Human Appreciation Society, but Luz is accepted into Hexside. After this, not feeling like herself, Ida decides to rest. Luz, Willow, and Gus decide to go watch a Grudgeby match but miss the bus. They decide to take Ida's staff but crash into a tree, injuring Owlbird, who then flees. Meanwhile, King finds Ida in a docile Owlbeast state and uses her to get revenge on kids at the park, though this causes Animal Control to come and take Ida. King only manages to free Ida with his high-pitched scream, which causes her to laugh. Meanwhile, Luz and the gang go after Owlbert. They run into the Bat Queen, who makes her take a group of tests. Each test is designed to get Luz to quit, but Owlbert is inspired by her love and decides to come back with her. King would later write a book with Luz, but he ends up getting captured and forced to write more books. However, with Luz's help, he escapes. Discovering the second glyph. Oh yeah, all Luz could do was make little light balls at this point. Ida takes Luz to the Knee, which is a snowy wasteland, to learn more magic from the island itself. However, she becomes discouraged and ends up trying to use a training wand that the Blights are using. She awakens a Slither Beast, which attempts to capture them all. However, Luz defeats it when she learns a new ice magic glyph, after observing it in a snowflake. After this, Luz displays her abilities to Principal Bump, who decides which track to put her in. Luz wants to study them all, but Bump doesn't allow this. She ends up in the detention track when she breaks too many rules and becomes friends with the problem children who just wanted to mix magic. Unbeknownst to them, a basilisk infiltrates the school and begins absorbing the students and staff's magic. Together with the problem children, they defeat the basilisk and, as a reward, are allowed to study all forms of magic. They then go to a carnival. Mr. Tibble tricks a jealous king into using a potion to shrink Gus and Willow so he can keep hanging out with Luz, but then they all get shrunk. However, they trick Tibbles into bringing them back to full size. Later, Willow, through one of her classes, is shown how to turn memories into photos. However, Amity sees some involving her because she and Willow were good friends when they were younger, and so to hide her secret, she burns the photos, but accidentally causes Willow to forget everything. Luz and Amity go in to restore the memories, but are stopped by the inner Willow, who's angry because of Amity's betrayal. It's then revealed why Amity betrayed Willow, and the two begin to mend their friendship. Grom Night. Luz learns that Hexside has a version of prom night known as Grom Night. However, instead of being merely a dance, they're required to have a Grom Queen fight a dark entity known as Grom, who lives under the school and can transform into someone's worst fears. Amity is the Grom Queen this year, but she doesn't want to do it, so Luz decides to help her. Together, they face their fears and defeat Grom for another year. Willow later receives a confidence boost from her friends. However, Basha is annoyed by this and begins to bully Willow more. To stop this, Luz challenges her to a grudge match. All the while, Lilith attempts to arrest Ida, who is a extremely wanted criminal, but fails. Amity decides to help Willow win the match, and she reveals that before Basha was the leader of the Grudgeby team, Amity was. And when Luz decides to use a special move she learned from Azura the Good Witch, she ends up embarrassing them and breaking Gus's flags. Amity reveals that she tried the same when she was Grudgeby team leader, but got people hurt. Luz decides to apologize to Willow and even tries to call it off with Basha, but they aren't allowed out of the challenge, so they need to play the game. Luz and the others are losing, but when they work together and use the new technique from Azura the Good Witch, they manage to pull it off, only to realize they auto-lose because Basha got the rusty smidge, invalidating the entire game. Gee, I wonder if this is a reference to any other made-up witch-wizard sports. Despite this, everyone congratulates Willow, causing Basha to walk off in anger and shame. It then turns out that Ida's curse is getting worse, and so Luz decides to figure out how to fix it. They go on a school field trip to the Emperor's castle, where Luz heard a healing hat is, so she plans to, borrow it without permission to help Ida. But she's found out by Lilith, who captures her and uses her to lure Ida to the castle. While there, Lilith reveals in the midst of a duel that she was the one who cursed Ida, and she knows that Belos can cure it if she joins the Emperor's coven. Ida refuses, saves Luz, loses control of the curse, turning into the Owl Beast permanently, and is then captured by Lilith, allowing Luz to escape back to the Owl House defeated. Within the castle, Belos declares that he'll petrify Ida as opposed to healing her, and Lilith is surprised because this is basically a death sentence. Luz and King sneak into the Conformatorium where they find Ida. She's still an Owl Beast, but she has enough of her mind to speak due to Belos' power. She informs her of what Belos plans with the door to the human world and tells Luz that she needs to destroy it. Luz ends up confronting Lilith, who reveals that she didn't know what the curse would do to Ida, and that she never meant for any of this to happen. She gives Luz Ida's staff. Together they confront Belos, but Lilith is captured along with King, who are sent to be petrified too. Luz fights Belos, but fails to defeat him, instead destroying the door and fleeing to rescue Lilith, King, and Ida. Once she does, Lilith uses her pain-sharing ability to share Ida's curse, lessening it on her and inflicting half of it on herself. Meanwhile, Belos begins reconstructing the door and proceeds to send the Golden Guard, Hunter, to watch the Owl House. Oh yeah, also the Owl House has like an actual owl snake thing in the house named Hootie. I just realized I haven't mentioned Hootie at all, and that seems like an important detail. So Hootie is there. People ignore him because he's loud and obnoxious and weird, but he's there. Clawthorn Sisters United. Lilith and Ida can't perform magic anymore due to sharing the curse. However, Luz proceeds to teach them about magic via glyphs. She then joins a pirate crew that's sent to capture a Selkadamus alongside King. However, King is captured by the Golden Guard, who then uses him as a hostage, demanding that Luz kills the Selkadamus. Recruiting Ida's help, they fake the creature's death to satisfy the Golden Guard, and are then rewarded with Selkigris, a valuable substance. Later, Luz is expelled alongside Gus and Willow because Amity's parents feel that they're a distraction to her. She decides to make a deal with Amity's family to get Willow and Gus reinstated, but she isn't aware that they plan to kill her. However, Amity stands up against them and manages to save Luz and get her out and her friends reaccepted into Hexside. Lilith doesn't believe that King is truly a king of demons, so King takes them to the island where he was born to prove it, which begins to cause Lilith to believe. However, Ida explains how she found King and what it means. King becomes upset and runs off. They track him and are attacked by a creature known only as Jean-Luc, a fairly strong name for a meat monster. However, finding King, they flee to the highest room, where they discover King's old room where he hatched. He recounts an old memory that came to mind and how he had a father, but he doesn't know who he is. He manages to find an amulet which he wears as he believes it could be his real name. Having found this information, he returns home with Jean-Luc, though the monster lost all movement after leaving the castle. Ida and Lilith's mother then returns and plans to heal them using info she found from a man named Wartlop, though this is all a con and a allegory to alternative medicine. In a rage, she threatens to kill them and then administers a healthy dose of potion and motherly love to save her daughters from the monstrous forms they had taken. Luz also apparently has a doppelganger living with her mother. Gus then doubts himself when Glandis illusionists arrive. They go to Looking Glass Ruins to find Galder Stones with which they can cast even stronger magic. All the while, Luz and Amity search for information regarding another human who came years before Luz called Philip Whittabane. I'm sure you remember him. However, a mouse eats the journal and Amity gets fired. She then confides in her brother and sister about her feelings for Luz as they recolor her hair purple. Luz manages to get Amity's job back for her, and Gus then manages to scare off the Glandis High students who are planning to raid the site, which turns out to be a graveyard. He casts powerful illusions that scare them off and is then thanked by a spirit from the past. The Golden Guard is then sent by Belos to find Palisman, basically a combination between familiars and witches' staffs. The Golden Guard plans to take the ones that the Bat Queen had rescued and brought to Hexside to be adopted. However, Luz tries to take them back and they crash as the Golden Guard is attempting to steal them through his balloon. The Emperor's goon, Kikimora, finds them and says that the Golden Guard is dead in hopes of upping her position with Belos. Together with Luz, they work to get the Palisman back. The Palisman are freed, and Hunter is taught about glyphs. They manage to escape with the Palisman and defeat Kikimora. Luz is then given Palistrom wood by King and Ida, with which she can carve her own Palisman, when she's ready. One of the Palisman also follows Hunter home, a little cardinal. Ida feels sad because Luz and even King will leave her soon to return to their respective families, feeling a sort of premature empty nest syndrome. As she sulks in town, she meets a secret rebel group called the Bards Against the Throne, or BATS for short, led by Rain Whispers. Coincidentally, Ida's ex. They learn that Ida's powers are a bit wonky, and because of the curse, whenever she plays a mandolin using magic, everything around her shrivels and dies. They plan to use this in a mission, but things go south. After barely escaping, Ida goes back and helps King send a message to his father, where he declares that he's changed his name to King Clawthorn. Rain is captured by Kikimora, who puts him to sleep, as they're very important to Belos' plans. Hooty then plans to help Ida, King, and Luz with their problems, but seemingly makes things worse for them, in traditional Hooty fashion. He makes things awkward between Luz and Amity, fails to help King find out what type of demon he is, and causes Ida to turn into the Owl Beast. However, things do eventually return to normal, and maybe even better than normal as Amity and Luz acknowledge their feelings towards each other, officially becoming girlfriends. King discovers his strange powers and admits he's closer to the truth, and Ida turns into Super Saiyan 4, Harpy, in which she has all the powers of her Owl Beast form, but she can, actually control them. Hooty later meets a monster who claims to be King's father and tells Hooty to give him a letter. But Hooty, being Hooty, immediately forgets and eats it and doesn't tell King because he had immediately forgotten, being like, "Whoops, I hope that wasn't anything important." Luz gets sick, and the Echo Mouse, the mouse that ate the journal of Philip Whittabane, tells them about Titan's blood and how it can get them back to the human world. Ida, meanwhile, is trying to turn into her Harpy form by watching Dragon Ball and mimicking the Super Saiyan 3 scene from the Boo saga. This fails, but it was hella funny if you're a Dragon Ball fan. They go to Eclipse Lake to find it, but Hunter and Kikimora go there as well. Turns out it's bad for them all because there is no Titan's blood here, only a substance known as Fool's Blood. Hunter tries to get some of the blood, but is horrified to find none exists any longer. Both Hunter and Amity remember that the portal key has some of the Titan's blood within it, and so they fight for it. But when Hunter threatens Luz's life, Amity gives in and lets him have it, though the key is cracked, and the Titan blood begins to spill out. Luz then manages to create a new portal, but it's defective and doesn't actually get her home, and instead sends her to a sort of in-between dimension. However, she discovers a basilisk named V, who was one of Belos' experiments living with Luz's mother. V, however, ends up captured by a conspiracy theorist named Jacob, I'm both offended and flattered, who plans to expose the creature and prove he isn't crazy. However, spilling the beans to her mother, Luz helps V escape. In a single heartfelt moment, she promises her mother that she'll return to her soon and is pulled out of the collapsing portal by King and Ida. As the people of Bonesboro prepare for the annual Coven Day parade, Luz discovers that Kikimora has a hard time choosing between visiting her family or attending the Coven Day parade. She feels connected with Kikimora for a moment, and due to her kindness and naivete, she attempts to help her, but not without a price. She wants to get Rain back for Ida. Kikimora agrees and is then kidnapped to help her out. However, Terrace Snapdragon, the head of the Plant Coven, convinces Kikimora to return to them and prove her loyalties. Luz then tells Amity about her encounter with her mother, and then the parade is cut short when Belos makes an announcement. He reveals his face to the people for the first time and announces the Day of Unity, which is essentially the promised day from Fullmetal Alchemist under a different name. After this, Luz and Lilith go back in time under the names Crab Maiden and Aunt Gertrude. I'm sure you know how that went. They also meet Philip and discover that, he kinda sucked back then, so Luz is a little deflated from the adventure. But at this point, she still doesn't know that Philip becomes Belos. Hunter is then sent to Hexside by Coven leader Darius to get more recruits for the Emperor's Coven. But instead, he ends up becoming friends with Gus, Willow, Scara, and Viney. And after, like, a whole bunch of drama and Liar revealed stuff, Darius tells Hunter that this was basically the intent of the mission, since he needs to actually make some friends with some people his own age outside of the castle. So it's kind of wholesome. But he also sent Hunter on this mission just because he wanted him to kind of go away. Anyway, Amity and Luz also go looking for the author of the Azura books, believing that it might be somebody from both of their realms who's able to switch between them. Turns out it was all Mr. Tibbles who would change the picture of the author to make more cash by selling the book in both realms. Amity then joins the Bonesboro Brawl. Luz tries to help her, but she's acting strange. Ida tries to get Warden Wrath to tell them about the Day of Unity using Edric's potion, but it's been altered to work faster and it instead turns him into a monster. However, after defeating him, he answers their questions. Amity's dad, Alador, helps fight the monster too, even though he initially came to stop Amity. Though she tells him that she doesn't plan to join a coven, and he respects her decision. Luz then informs Amity that today is the anniversary of the death of her father, and she couldn't be with her mom, which she usually is. They usually go visit his grave. So they bundle some flowers and float them away into the starry night to comfort Luz. Ida then recounts how she met Rain and how she was about to be expelled from Hexside, but was given one more chance by former Principal Faust if she could bring home a blue ribbon from a school representation program. There, she met Rain, who worked with her to accomplish the tasks. However, Terrace Snapdragon, the host, found it boring, so she made a hedge maze and makes it a Covens vs. Wilds game, which Rain and Ida tell her is pointless, impressing her and ensuring that both Rain and Ida get to be in Hexside. Luz later gets trapped inside of Belos' mind when interfering in a spell that Rain and Darius plan to use instead. There, she and Hunter, who also became trapped, run into a monster composed of Palisman souls Belos had absorbed. They then learn about Belos' past and encounter Inner Belos, who puts all of his cards on the table, including Hunter's past and creation, and prepares to kill them, though they're later saved by Ida and King. Later, Hooty coughs up the letter that he had eaten, and King ends up reading it. Turns out it's a summons to an island. There, they find people who look like King, but it turns out that they're just witches in disguise. Titan hunters, in fact. And they also find out that King is a Titan. They attempt to sacrifice him to their leader, the Collector, but they escape and destroy the portal to the island. The Emperor's guards then attack the Owl House. Hunter is hiding in Hexside, but Coven guards come attempting to force all of the students to join a coven. Gus casts illusions to help them escape, and then they tell the rest of the school what the Day of Unity is all about. Returning from the Titan Trappers, Luz, King, and Hooty discovered the empty Owl House and that Ida and Lilith have escaped to the Knee. After they tell them that King is a Titan, Lilith begins to treat him like a god, making King feel uncomfortable. King then meets the best boy of the series, a former Coven guard named Steve, whom he goes out with to find himself. Ida and Lilith, who had escaped from the Owl House to the Knee, decide to send King and Luz away to protect them, but Luz is having none of that. And so, Luz and Ida fight over the issue. However, they're then captured, but instead of being taken to Belos, they're taken to a rebel group known as Covens Against the Throne, led by Rain and Darius, aka the Cats. They discuss a plan to defeat Belos, and Luz begins to carve for Palisman. The day before the Day of Unity, Ida is branded with the Bard Coven sigil, where they plan to use her to corrupt the draining spell with her curse. Meanwhile, Gus, Hunter, and Luz go to the Blight residence to free the grounded kids. Luz and Amity finally on screen share a beautifully animated kiss. They then go to the Blight Industries factory to confront Amity's parents and stop them from creating more abominations for Belos, which, at this point, are basically war machines. Amity's mother, Odalia, reveals that she knew the plan all along and didn't care so long as she was rewarded in the end. Alador is surprised by this and sabotages the plant to stop production. Luz and Hunter then switch appearances so Luz can get to Belos as he's aware of the sabotage plan. As the Day of Unity begins, Ida can't get through, as it's revealed that Belos knew all along what she was planning to do. This culminates into a huge battle between Luz and Belos, transforming into a Palisman monster form in which the two fight. It's then revealed that only the Collector can defeat Belos and stop the Day of Unity, and so they break the Collector free of their prison and destroys, seemingly, Belos and stops the Day of Unity spell. However, they begin to reshape the Boiling Isles to start this game that King promised he would play with the Collector. A game that King, in a moment of panic, decided to call the Owl House. As the Collector begins to reshape reality, King pushes Luz and her friends through a newly constructed portal to the human world alongside a piece of Belos. Luz then reunites with her mother where the season ends, and so do we, because there's nothing more to tell right now. So what do you think is going to happen now that the Day of Unity is past? Season 3 will probably launch soon, hopefully maybe, but due to the series' premature cancellation, the third season will only consist of 3 40-minute episodes. So, will Belos return? Will he have some sort of redemption arc? What's the deal with the Collector? Will everyone just kill each other? Okay, probably not that last one. That's doesn't seem like a likely scenario. Either way, let us know what you think, and be sure to like and subscribe to show support for the channel. Don't forget to ring the bell to be notified and whatnot, and remember, Frederator loves you.